The day my father, Louisa Lin, got remarried, the ceremony was small but suffocatingly warm. It was an orchestrated, perfect kind of warmth, curated for the benefit of the 50 guests gathered in the manicured gardens of our Highgate home in London. The sun was doing its duty, casting a flattering golden light on everything, most especially the bride. Her name was Louisa Yi. She was 15 years younger than Lucas, a gap that my father, a successful academic and retired investor, insisted was a testament to his vitality. Louisa possessed an ethereal beauty, a face soft and innocent, a voice like a melody played on a perfectly tuned harp, and eyes that held a depth of devotion so radiant it felt less like love and more like strategic, blinding worship. She wore a simple, elegant ivory dress that somehow managed to look both expensive and humble. The guests, mostly my father's aging colleagues and their wives, whispered behind their champagne flutes, their voices carrying the specific, delicate venom of privileged society. Louisa Lin is truly a lucky man, someone sighed. To find love again, after Emilia's passing, and with such a young, beautiful soul. She's an absolute saint, another agreed, leaving her own career to focus on his happiness, selfless. My father looked exactly what he wanted to be, redeemed. His arm was wrapped protectively around Louisa's slender waist, his smile stretched wide, erasing the lines of worry and age. He was experiencing a rebirth, one bought and paid for by a woman who offered perfect, untainted femininity. I, Valerie Lin, stood slightly apart, dressed in a sharp obsidian suit that felt like armor. I watched the scene not as a participant, but as a sociocultural observer. My role that day was simple: the dutiful, slightly detached daughter. My internal role was infinitely more complex. The only person who knew the script. I am better known online as Professor Matcha. My blog has 3 million subscribers, dedicated to the intricate, often invisible mechanics of emotional manipulation. My specialty is deconstructing the myth of the green tea woman, the kind who weaponizes innocence, fragility, and apparent kindness to gain control, often in a domestic setting. I have spent years analyzing their tactics, their scripts, their perfect tears, and the woman standing before me, Louisa Yi, was not merely a character in my research. She was the final exam. The climax of her performance arrived during the toast. As the glasses clinked, Louisa stepped forward, taking the microphone with a practiced, almost nervous grace. Her voice was pure, sweet crystal. "To Lucas," she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "He is the light I never knew I was missing. He has given me a new life, a new family." Then she turned to me. Her eyes, a perfect dewy brown, welled up, one single, perfectly clear tear tracking down her cheek. It was a tear of strategic vulnerability, deployed at maximum visibility. "And Valerie," she continued, her voice catching with effort, "I know I could never replace your mother, Emilia. That is a place sacred only to her and to you. But I promise you this: I will love your father with everything I have, and I will be a friend, a mentor, and perhaps, one day, a confidant to you. I ask for nothing but peace and acceptance in this new family." The entire crowd collectively melted into a puddle of emotional approval. The women dabbed their eyes. The men looked at Lucas with a mix of envy and respect. It was textbook perfection. Self-deprecating, yet powerful, humble, yet demanding. She had used the memory of my dead mother, a sacred boundary, to demonstrate her own saintly humility. My father, deeply moved, pulled her into his arms to comfort her fragile display of empathy. Over Louisa's silk-covered shoulder, his eyes met mine. His glare was a clear, silent accusation. "Why can't you be happy for me? Look how kind she is. And you are still cold." I said nothing. I just took a slow sip of my water, my eyes locked on Louisa's face. She didn't flinch. She kept the tears streaming, the gentle shake in her body, maintaining the image of the vulnerable angel being protected by her handsome husband. But in the millisecond when Lucas turned his head, I caught it. A flicker of something cold, something calculating. A tiny, internal victory dance deep in her pupils. The Grand Master has arrived, I thought, a cold exhilaration rising in my chest. The game has officially begun. The following week was the soft launch of her campaign. Louisa moved into our house, which she immediately renamed, sweetly, The Haven. She didn't use a moving truck. She seemed to simply appear, along with several perfectly curated, minimalist pieces of decor that silently suggested my mother's old, slightly more cluttered taste was inadequate. Every morning, was a performance of domestic bliss. She rose before the dawn to prepare a breakfast of selfless love for my father. It was always organic, always beautifully plated, always perfectly timed to be ready, just as he walked downstairs. One day, a matcha latte, oh, the irony, with a heart traced in the foam. The next, a bowl of artisanal granola she claimed to have mixed herself. When Lucas left for his consulting work, she would stand on the front steps, waving gently, murmuring words I could hear clearly from my bedroom window. "Drive safe, Lucas. The world needs your wisdom, but I need you home safe." She was speaking to him, but the line was meant for me, or perhaps for the silent judging world. In the evening, when he returned, the routine was even more precise. She would rush to the door, take his briefcase as if it weighed a ton, offer his slippers, and coo softly, "You must be exhausted, my love. The weight of the world is on your shoulders. I made your favorite, a slow-cooked lamb stew simmering for 6 hours, just for you." My father, basking in this unprecedented level of attention, was completely transformed. He looked 10 years younger, perpetually pampered and thrilled. He would tell me every night over dinner, his eyes shining with infatuation, "Valerie, your Aunt Louisa is truly an amazing woman. She has brought light back into this house. I finally found my soulmate." I would smile politely, saying only, "She certainly seems very dedicated, Dad." Dedicated was a neutral, factual term. It didn't imply love, or sincerity, or anything beyond hard work. It was my way of signaling to her, silently, that I saw the effort, if not the motive. Because I knew the pattern. This was the overture. This was the period of perfect sainthood, the establishment of the baseline of goodness, the creation of an unimpeachable moral fortress. She was gathering ammunition in the form of my father's absolute trust and the world's praise. And I also knew the main course, inevitably, would be me. The presence of a detached, analyzing daughter was a threat to her carefully constructed narrative. The green tea queen needs a victim, and Lucas was too valuable to be the target. The target had to be the threat. The first direct strike came precisely 1 week after she moved in, Saturday morning. I was reading a philosophy paper in bed, enjoying the rare quiet of the weekend. Knock, knock, gentle, almost timid. "Valerie, are you awake, honey? Aunt Louisa made your favorite, those pain au chocolat from that little French bakery you love." Her voice was the sonic equivalent of cloying fake sugar sweetness. I knew that bakery was 20 minutes away, a heroic feat of thoughtfulness. I also knew it was a test. I pretended not to hear, played dead. I needed to see her next move. A normal person would leave the pastry and a note. A manipulator needs to be seen being kind. A few minutes later, the soft knock was replaced by a low, trembling voice in the hallway, talking to Lucas. "Lucas, is Valerie still upset with me? She didn't answer her door. I'm so afraid she doesn't like me. Maybe I should move out. I don't want to cause any problems between a father and his beloved daughter. Her happiness is so much more important than mine." The volume was perfectly set to be overheard. The tone was perfect. Sorrowful, selfless, fragile. The ultimate martyrdom. Then came the heavy, angry footsteps. Lucas's. Bang, bang, bang. This was not a knock. This was an ultimatum. "Valerie, open this door, right now." His voice was already heavy with fury. I knew I couldn't ignore this one without sealing my own fate as the difficult daughter. I got up slowly, adjusted my silk pajamas, and opened the door, rubbing my eyes sleepily. "Dad? What's going on?" It's Saturday morning. I was still reading in bed. He was red-faced, his hand shaking slightly as he pointed an accusing finger at me. Before he could unleash the full tirade, Louisa, ever the perfect tragic figure, stepped gracefully between us. She was wearing a simple cotton robe, her hair slightly messy, lending an air of absolute authenticity to her distress. "Don't scold her, Lucas, please," she interjected, her voice breaking dramatically. "She's still a student. It's normal for her to sleep late. It's my fault. I should never have disturbed her. I'm the one who should apologize." While she spoke her angelic lines to Lucas, her eyes flicked towards me. It was a minuscule, instantaneous movement, a flash of triumphant malice, sharp as a razor, utterly invisible to my father. This was the classic proxy aggression tactic. Blame yourself for an action you didn't commit, so that the other person's reaction makes them look cruel and unreasonable. You shrink to trigger the protector instinct. Predictably, Lucas fell for it spectacularly. He pulled Louisa into his chest, cradling her head, like a precious, damaged bird. Look at your attitude, Valerie, he barked at me, holding his wife tight. Aunt Louisa goes out of her way to bring you a treat, and this is how you treat her? Go downstairs and apologize for your rudeness, right now. I looked past him, directly at Louisa. She met my gaze, holding the vulnerable pose perfectly. A small, private smile tugging at the corner of her lips. The smile of a puppet master who had just pulled the right string. I raised my hand slightly, a gesture that could be interpreted as surrender, or perhaps simply acknowledgement. I smiled back faintly, a cold, empty smile of my own. The first move was hers, and she had won the initial skirmish. But the second move, the long game of intellectual countermanipulation, was about to begin. The House of Light had just gained a shadow that knew how to smile. The apology I gave my father was a masterpiece of emotional subtlety, a performance worthy of the West End stage. I didn't really apologize. I simply said, "I'm sorry if my sleepiness made you feel bad, Aunt Louisa." I made the mistake Lucas made, shifting the focus from the action to the feeling, which allowed both of them to save face. Lucas bought it. Louisa saw right through it. Her smile right after was a silent contract. We both know what this is. After that initial skirmish, the house in Highgate became a beautifully decorated battlefield. My father, Lucas, retreated into the comfortable shell of a man newly in love, completely blind to the drama unfolding under his own roof. Louisa, now confident, began to escalate her game, not with grand gestures, but with the careful, almost artistic placement of small inconsistencies. My training as Professor Matcha had taught me that a manipulator's mask always slips in the minutiae, the things they forget to polish, and I was now a full-time, unpaid researcher, living inside my own case study. The first crack was the medicine. Lucas had a habit of keeping all his over-the-counter painkillers in the medicine cabinet in the master bath, a clear glass box, easy to see. Now they were gone. One afternoon, while Lucas was at his office, I saw a familiar orange prescription bottle, a common anti-anxiety drug, the kind you don't just get from a GP, tucked deep inside a decorative ceramic jar on Louisa's bedside table. Not Lucas's, but hers. She wasn't just subtly managing my father's life. She was managing her own equilibrium with a hidden chemical clutch. A master manipulator needs a master stabilizer. I didn't touch it. Touching was messy. Observation was clean. The second sign was the phone calls. Always after 10 p.m. Always when Lucas was in the study. Always in a whispered, hushed tone in the sunroom, where the acoustics were bad and the glass doors were closed. She'd say very little, but the rhythm of her responses was telling. Not the cadence of a casual friend, but the clipped, urgent, almost deferential tone of someone taking orders. Once, I crept close enough to the door, pretending to be looking for a lost book, and caught only 3 words. "The documents are safe." She hung up immediately, turning to me with a face so pale and startled that for a moment, the mask was gone, replaced by genuine, cold fear. "Valerie, you scared me!" "Just talking to my sister about a family matter," she chirped, the composure snapping back in place like a rubber band. The forced smile felt brittle against her genuine shock. The third, and most blatant, was the control over Lucas. Slowly, sweetly, she was walling him off. She convinced him to change the Wi-Fi password to Louisa and Lucas forever, a subtle digital wall. Then she volunteered to organize his personal bank statements, citing his stressful work schedule. She even started screening his non-essential calls, claiming he needed undisturbed focus for his work. The most telling move was the restriction of my access to him. Whenever I wanted to talk to Lucas privately about my university application or a simple request for his opinion, Louisa would materialize, glass of water in hand, a worried frown on her perfect face. "Lucas, honey, you look tired." "Valerie, can't this wait until the morning? He needs his rest." She didn't forbid. She cared. She used the shield of his well-being to sever our connection. She was systematically isolating the primary asset from the only threat. I watched all this with a cold, focused fury that bypassed tears. Crying was for the victims. I was the counter-analyst. A few days later, I drove to a specialized electronics store near King's Cross, bought the smallest, highest-definition mini-camera I could find, and carefully hid it behind a row of antique books in the main drawing room facing the grand sofa, her primary stage for receiving guests and making her secret calls. And I wasn't just observing her. I was creating a time-stamped, irrefutable record. I felt a chill of professional detachment. This was no longer just about my father. It was a pure, cold study in human behavior. Welcome to the laboratory, Louisa. I nicknamed the hidden folder where I stored the encrypted data. The green room. The day she found the camera, I was in the university library, reviewing my notes. I knew she had, because when I checked the live feed on my encrypted tablet, the camera had shifted, not removed, not broken, just tilted by a fraction of a degree. It now faced a beautifully arranged vase of lilies, not the sofa where she usually sat. A clear, silent message. I know you are watching, and I am choosing what you see. Her brilliance was in the subtlety. By not removing it, she made me doubt. Did she really see it? Or did the cleaner accidentally knock it? But I knew better. Only a master would leave the weapon in place, slightly altered, to feed the paranoia of the enemy and to signal her own awareness. She was declaring herself an equal player. That evening, the tension was so thick you could carve it with a knife. Lucas hadn't noticed. He was discussing the fluctuating price of gold, while Louisa served a roast that looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine. She looked stunning in a deep burgundy silk dress, her hair perfectly coiled. Everything was bright, elegant, and stiflingly perfect. Then she did it. She knew I had to be hurt, and she knew exactly which weapon to use. Lucas, remember how Valerie's mother, Amelia, used to tell me about her garden in Kent? She was telling me about the roses. She had such a beautiful, gentle spirit. I wish I could have known her better. I think we would have been such good friends. The air went dead. Lucas stopped chewing, the fork hovering halfway to his mouth. Amelia, my mother. She had been gone for 7 years. Her memory a beautiful, fragile glass object that we rarely dared to touch. Louisa was using her name as a subtle weapon, pulling the ghost into the room to watch. Lucas looked instantly miserable, his eyes dulling with old pain. He looked guilty for replacing her, guilty for being happy. I felt a sharp, immediate sting, not of sadness, but of outrage at the pure, calculated malice. She was weaponizing grief. I placed my knife down gently, the metal scraping the porcelain plate, the sound echoing slightly in the sudden silence. Louisa's eyes met mine across the table. Her expression was all sweet, sorrowful sympathy, a perfect mask of remembrance. A performance for one, my father. I smiled back. A cold, hard, unblinking smile. My voice was level, almost a purr, cutting through the heavy silence. Louisa, I said, leaning forward slightly, keeping my elbows off the table in a display of impeccable manners. I appreciate you remembering Mum, but you shouldn't use the dead to control the living. The sentence hit the room like a physical object. Lucas gasped, a sharp, choked sound. Louisa's composure shattered, just for a fleeting, terrifying second. Her eyes flashed, not with sorrow, but with the raw, reptilian anger of someone whose perfect, calculated plan has been interrupted by an unexpected counterattack. It was the first time I saw the true predator beneath the veil. She recovered instantly, pulling the mask back on. Her lip trembled perfectly. Valerie, I didn't mean it that way. I was only trying to connect with you. I thought we could share memories of Amelia. Her voice trailed off. The picture of hurt innocence. Lucas, of course, jumped to her defense, his voice thick with protective anger, his face flushed with embarrassment. Valerie, apologize to Louisa now. That was completely uncalled for. You owe her respect. I didn't argue. Argument was validation. I simply pushed my chair back, stood up straight, and walked out of the room. I walked straight to my bedroom and locked the door. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I was exhilarated. She had tried to break me with a memory. I had stabbed her with a truth. It was the first honest exchange we'd had. The battle lines were no longer vague. I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and began reviewing the footage from the mini-camera. The battle of the house had officially begun. I had just declared war. The silence that followed the dinner table confrontation was louder than any fight. Lucas avoided my eyes. Louisa predictably elevated her performance of martyrdom. She spent the next 2 days moving around the house with a visible aura of quiet, long-suffering sadness, speaking only in soft, hesitant whispers, making sure Lucas saw her every pained expression. She was the wounded saint, and I was the ungrateful viper. Lucas compensated by treating her with exaggerated tenderness. He bought her a vintage emerald locket, kissed her hand constantly, and glared at me whenever I entered the room. The isolation was immediate and profound. I was a ghost in my own home, exactly where Louisa wanted me, but the isolation gave me freedom. I spent every evening immersed in the green room, the encrypted archive of my surveillance. I reviewed the footage from the tilted camera, watching Louisa move like a graceful feline across the drawing room. She rarely sat on the sofa now. She used the quiet time to read complex financial papers or make those hushed, late-night calls near the fireplace. The calls were still bafflingly short and coded, always ending with the same phrase, or a variation of it. "It's handled. Don't worry about the paperwork." The paper trail was still just a whisper, not a chain. Then, 3 nights after the dinner confrontation, Louisa announced her latest initiative, a reconciliation dinner. "I want us to start fresh, Valerie," she said, stopping me in the hall, her hands clasped delicately. "I know I haven't been perfect, and I truly want us to be a family. I've arranged a beautiful evening, candles, your father's favorite wine, just us." I agreed instantly. This was not a truce. It was a new stage for the next act of the war. A performance of peace is the perfect cover for a covert strike. The dinner was a tableau of domestic fantasy. The dining room was draped in soft candlelight, a warm, amber glow that rendered the room blurry and romantic. Lucas was beaming, convinced that his two women were finally uniting. Louisa wore a flowing lavender dress and a gentle smile that promised forgiveness. She had gone to great lengths, even pulling out the antique silver my mother had always used for special occasions. It was all designed to evoke comfort, security, and sentimentality. The atmosphere was so rich with carefully manufactured emotion that it felt suffocating. Louisa spoke of her love for Lucas, her hopes for our future, and subtly, repeatedly, she referred to Lucas and herself as a single, indivisible unit. "We think Valerie should focus on her studies. We are so happy here." I played my part flawlessly. I complimented the food, smiled at Lucas's anecdotes, and even offered a quiet, sincere-sounding thanks to Louisa for her effort. I was so charming, so compliant, that Lucas relaxed completely, sipping his wine, convinced the battle was over. But my mind was elsewhere. The candlelight, while romantic, was bad for observation. The soft music was bad for listening. It was an environment engineered to suppress critical thinking. After the dessert, a complicated lemon tart, Louisa insisted on serving herself. I excused myself to the powder room. I didn't go there. I went straight to my laptop. The reconciliation dinner was the perfect diversion. I opened the feed from the mini camera, checking the timestamps against the dinner schedule. I was looking for any moment where she might have left the table, even for a second. The first 15 minutes of the dinner were there. The full hour was there. Then, a massive gap. The file had been clipped. A full 30-minute segment was gone, missing from the footage. My heart hammered against my ribs. She hadn't just tilted the camera, she had accessed the hidden drive remotely and deleted data. This meant she was not only technologically proficient, but she also knew exactly what she was erasing. This wasn't guesswork. It was a cleanup operation. I scrolled desperately through the remaining fragments. There was a section where Lucas had left the room briefly to get more wine. Louisa was alone, standing by the mantelpiece. She thought the room was empty, the camera harmlessly pointed at the lilies. I cranked up the volume on the small, discreet speaker. The video was dark because of the distance and the candlelight, but the audio was surprisingly clear. I watched her take out her phone, not her usual phone, but a secondary burner phone I hadn't seen before. She typed something, then held it to her ear, speaking in a voice so low it was almost the rustle of silk. "Yes, I've done it," she whispered. "The distraction is in place. No, Lucas is completely blind. The girl is the problem, not him." She paused, listening. Her expression was tight, focused, the face of a CEO making a high-stakes transaction, not a devoted wife. Then came the phrase that froze my blood. It wasn't the documents or the paperwork. It was personal, chilling, and directed entirely at me. "She's just a child," Louisa said, her voice dropping to a near-inaudible, venomous hiss. "Easy to break. Her weakness is predictable. Just keep pressing on the wound and she'll shatter." A pause. She chuckled, a dry, soundless little laugh. Then she hung up, placed the phone back in her lavender clutch, smoothed her dress, and walked back to the dining room, her angelic smile back in place. Total time elapsed. Less than 90 seconds. 30 seconds of pure, unadulterated truth. I leaned back in my chair, the shock reverberating through my body. "Easy to break." She didn't see me as a threat or even a rival. She saw me as a minor structural flaw, something to be demolished easily, with emotional pressure. She thought she had me figured out. She thought grief and anger were my only tools. I looked at the black screen, then at my own reflection in the dark glass of the laptop screen. My face was pale, my eyes wide, but they weren't filled with tears or defeat. They were filled with an ice crystalline clarity. I had been operating with a detached academic curiosity, the Professor Matcha, who observed the green tea phenomenon from a safe distance. I was a researcher, bound by the ethics of observation, but the rulebook had just been tossed into the candlelight. She wasn't just manipulating my father's money or love, she was deliberately trying to cause me psychological harm. She wanted to shatter me. I closed the laptop slowly, the click echoing in the quiet room. I didn't return to the dining room immediately. I went to the master bathroom and looked into the mirror, not the one that showed my face, but the one that showed the woman inside. The girl who wept over her mother's garden was gone. The researcher who documented the cruelty was gone. The woman staring back was cold, calm, and utterly resolved. She was no longer watching the game. She was about to start playing, and unlike Louisa, she had no pretense of innocence. My father wanted light in the house, but I now understood the message Louisa had inadvertently given me. In a house full of blinding light, shadows never truly disappear. They just learn how to smile. And my smile was about to become sharper, colder, and far more dangerous than hers. I walked back into the dining room, my movements smooth and deliberate. Louisa looked up, her face all sweetness and concern. "Valerie, is everything all right, honey? You look resolved." I sat down, picked up my water glass, and looked directly into her eyes. My smile was wide, genuine, and utterly terrifying. "Yes, Louisa," I replied. "Everything is perfect. I've just decided who I want to be in this family." She looked momentarily confused, a tiny wrinkle appearing between her perfect brows. Lucas just smiled, relieved. And Act 1, the observer has become the hunter. My declaration of war at the dinner table didn't provoke an immediate, violent response from Louisa. Instead, she chose a more sophisticated weapon, pity. She began the counteroffensive by establishing herself as the victim, making me look like the aggressor in my father's eyes. She would wake up weeping, claiming she had terrible nightmares about my coldness. She would accidentally leave her journal open, always on the page describing her struggle to love a daughter who actively rejected her. She began subtly altering her behavior, becoming overly solicitous of Lucas, doing everything short of tying his shoelaces for him, but always with a weary, fragile air. She was the one enduring, the one making endless sacrifices for peace. "I just wish Valerie would give me a chance, Lucas," she would sigh, loud enough for me to hear from the landing. "I love you so much, and all I want is for your daughter to be happy. But she seems determined to see me as a villain." Lucas naturally became her dedicated champion. He started seeing everything I did through the lens Louisa had crafted, the jealous, grieving, volatile daughter. If I was quiet, I was plotting. If I was focused on my studies, I was deliberately isolating myself. The house in Highgate, once the fortress of my childhood, was now a mirror reflecting only the version of me Louisa wanted Lucas to see. The first direct strike came not within the house, but in my professional life, my online platform, the very foundation of my identity and my expertise. I was sitting in my university office in London, preparing a lecture on the psychology of projection, when my phone started vibrating violently with alerts. My inbox was flooding, not with praise, but with venom. A new anonymous blogger, calling themselves The Unmasker, had launched a systematic, brilliantly executed attack on Professor Matcha. The post was an intellectual hit job, weaving together my real-life situation with fictionalized, damaging claims. The post accused me of being a hypocrite. She writes about green tea women because she is one herself. She is the jealous daughter manipulating her father with guilt, projecting her own manipulative tendencies onto the sweet, new stepmother. Professor Matcha is a sham, a fraud. Her academic work is based on superficial anecdotal evidence, and she has even plagiarized her thesis topic from an obscure source. The twist was the use of specific private details. The post referenced my mother's passing in a strangely compassionate yet condemning way, framing my academic pursuit as a pathological attempt to control my father's grief. It mentioned my use of many cameras in my research, a detail only I and one other person knew. It took my private life and warped it into a public narrative of academic dishonesty and emotional malice. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The university administration called me in for a disciplinary review regarding the plagiarism claim. My subscriber count plunged by 500,000 within hours. The comments section was a torrent of betrayal and abuse. "We trusted you, Professor. You're just a spoiled rich girl playing games. The real green tea was in the house all along. It was the daughter," I said in the cold university office. The sound of the provost's stern, disappointed voice echoing the public's condemnation. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest. This wasn't just a slight. It was an attempt to dismantle my entire persona, my intellectual validity, my armor. Louisa hadn't attacked my emotions. She had attacked my mind. She had hit precisely where I was most vulnerable, the intersection of my professional credibility and my personal pain. I returned home that evening, expecting to find Louisa waiting, perhaps with a faux sympathetic hug or a concerned brow. But the house was silent. Lucas was out. Louisa was in the kitchen, casually slicing vegetables. She looked up when I walked in, her face radiating serene calm. "Oh, Valerie, honey," she murmured, not missing a beat with the knife. "Rough day at the university? I saw a few things online. Nasty people. The internet trolls. Don't let them get to you. You know the truth." Her words were hollow, pure poison, wrapped in a soft blanket. She didn't have to confess. The subtle shine in her eyes, the careful control over her smile, the way she hadn't bothered to ask what the online rumors were. She knew the script, because she had written it. I stood there, watching her slice a courgette with surgical precision. The urge to lash out, to scream the truth, was overwhelming. My hands began to shake. This was the moment I was supposed to break. The moment the tears should start. The moment Professor Matcha, the detached analyst, collapses into Valerie, the wounded child. Instead, I looked at her, and a strange, hollow sound escaped my throat. It wasn't a sob, it was a laugh. A quiet, almost inaudible sound that grew into a slow, deliberate, terrifying smile. Louisa paused the slicing. She finally looked up, her serenity replaced by a flicker of confusion. My reaction was not in her script. "What's so funny, Valerie?" she asked, her voice losing a fraction of its sugary sweetness. "Nothing," I replied, the smile stretching across my face. It felt cold, unnatural. "It's just, you're good, Louisa. Really good. You hit me where it hurt, but you made a mistake." "Oh? And what was that?" "You thought that by breaking my professional face, you'd break me. But you just showed me your true self. You showed me you're not playing for love or money, but for destruction. And that," I said, walking closer, my eyes never leaving hers, "is a much more interesting game." I walked past her, the exhilaration of the pure emotional pivot making me feel lightheaded. I didn't go to my room. I went to the drawing room, to the lilies, and retrieved the mini camera. I didn't need it anymore. She knew it was there, and the truth was now external, running loose on the internet. My defeat was now my liberation. I was no longer the ethical researcher. I was a desperate player with nothing left to lose. My vulnerability was gone. I had hit the floor, and now, instead of crying, I was laughing. The rules of engagement had changed. Louisa had used a massive public strike. I would use the subtle, hidden counter-strike of infiltration. If she thought I was easy to break, I would show her how well I could bend. I would wear the mask she wanted me to wear, the meek, accepting daughter who just wanted peace. I would learn to lie with her. Louisa thought she had seen my collapse. What she witnessed was my transformation. When I returned to the house, I wasn't Valerie the angry daughter or Professor Matcha the detached analyst. I was Valerie the understudy, ready to learn the script of my own life from the master actress herself. If she wanted a pliable, grateful stepdaughter, I would give her a performance that earned an Oscar. The transformation was slow, subtle, and utterly convincing. I started small. I stopped locking my bedroom door. I began offering Lucas and Louisa smiles that were warm, almost sheepish, suggesting I felt remorse for my past behavior. I started using her language. "Louisa," I'd say, approaching her while she worked in her beloved kitchen. "Your dedication to Dad is truly inspiring. I was so stressed about the university stuff, I think I was unfair. I want to try harder." She eyed me like a cat watching a mouse, waiting for the trap to spring. But I was patient. I started helping out. Not with grand gestures, but with the mundane tasks she usually handled. Sorting the laundry, clearing the dinner plates, even volunteering to dust the drawing room. My movements were slow, careful, and deeply submissive. The most effective part of the act was the online retraction. I posted a muted, ambiguous statement on my blog. Professor Matcha. It wasn't an apology for plagiarism, but an apology for my behavior. To my followers, the past few weeks have been a period of intense personal reflection. I allowed my grief and family turmoil to overshadow my professional ethics. My focus is now on healing my relationship with my family. Sometimes, the most important case study is your own heart. I even uploaded a short, carefully edited vlog from the kitchen. It showed me and Louisa smiling stiffly together while preparing a meal. The caption read, "Building bridges. It takes time, but I'm learning from the best." Louisa watched the vlog with a quiet, triumphant satisfaction. She was convinced she had broken me and successfully recruited me into her narrative. She had turned her biggest threat into her most visible piece of propaganda. The master manipulator had mistaken my retreat for surrender. But while the outward-facing Valerie played the role of the devoted convert, the intellectual engine of Professor Matcha was running colder and faster than ever before. My primary target was not to hurt Louisa, but to find the foundation of her life, the hidden architecture beneath the beautiful facade. I was looking for the paper trail that linked the mysterious late-night calls to a concrete criminal objective. My first lead was the burner phone. I hadn't seen it since the night of the candles, but I knew its rhythm. I used my university access, calling in several favors from contacts in digital forensics, contacts who believed I was pursuing a legitimate research project on corporate espionage. I cross-referenced the call times from my old surveillance footage with local cell tower data around our Highgate neighborhood. It was a long shot, but after 2 weeks, I found a pattern. The burner phone consistently connected to a secure, untraceable server, and the calls, though short, often exchanged data packets with a single, unique, encrypted number. I tasked my contact to perform a deep trace on the unique identifier. The number didn't belong to a person, it belonged to a bank, a very specific, small private wealth management firm in Zurich, Switzerland, notorious for its high-level anonymity and its handling of complex international assets. This led me to the next breakthrough: the money. Using a fake identity and a fabricated story of inherited wealth that needed offshore management, I gained limited access to the firm's public-facing system. I found nothing on Louisa Yi, but the encrypted number pointed toward a single account that had recently seen massive, unusual activity. The account was held under a complex corporate shell based in the Cayman Islands, but the primary signatory was listed as Liu Jia. Liu Jia, Louisa Yi. The names were phonetically similar enough to be a deliberate, easy-to-remember alias. I ran the name Liu Jia through international public records. The search was a maze, but I was relentless. I discovered that Liu Jia, born in Hong Kong, had a documented history that Louisa had completely erased. A small, failed import-export business, a previous marriage to a businessman who had suddenly and mysteriously lost his entire fortune before disappearing, and a significant age change on her current passport application. The Louisa Yi that Lucas knew was approximately 5 years younger than the documented Liu Jia. She was literally a woman fabricated for a specific purpose. The whole picture began to snap into focus. Louisa was not a heartbroken woman seeking love. She was a professional con artist, a black widow, operating with meticulous, organized precision, likely targeting Lucas's substantial assets and access to high-level academic and corporate circles. The money, the secret calls, the complex foreign bank account. This was corporate espionage, or perhaps financial fraud, disguised as a love story. I downloaded every document, every digital artifact, and every call logs I could decrypt. I compiled it all into a single, massive file on an external hard drive, triple encrypted and hidden in the hollowed-out spine of an old, forgotten Latin textbook on my shelf. I titled the file with the ultimate irony: Green Tea Queen. As I worked, I maintained my cover. One evening, Lucas was watching the news, looking proud as Louisa discussed her new charity initiative in an interview. I walked over, put my hand gently on Louisa's shoulder, and smiled warmly. "Louisa, you're truly amazing," I murmured. "Your heart is so big. I don't know how you manage all this charity work and still take such good care of Dad." She leaned back slightly, basking in the praise. "It's easy, Valerie, when your motives are pure." I nodded slowly. "Of course, pure." I looked at my reflection in the dark television screen, the perfect, admiring stepdaughter. I had become a master of the double life, capable of operating with profound malice while radiating complete sincerity. I knew her past. I knew her secrets. I had the foundation of her entire life in my possession. The silent counterattack was complete. I was armed. The time for observation was over. The time for revelation was next. The charity gala was Louisa's grandest stage yet. Organized in aid of the Foundation for Academic Wellness, a charity Lucas generously funded, it was held in a spectacular ballroom near Kensington Palace. The guest list was a constellation of power: high-ranking university officials, influential journalists, major corporate donors, and the elite of London's intellectual society. This was where Louisa would cement her unimpeachable status as a philanthropic darling and an academic muse. And this was where I decided I would destroy her. I had meticulously prepared. I wore the dress Louisa had insisted on buying for me, a perfect, innocent white silk gown that made me look suitably young and demure. It was a calculated move. I was presenting myself as the pure vessel of truth, contrasting sharply with the dazzling, sophisticated woman Louisa would be. My hair was simply styled, my expression one of quiet, almost melancholic beauty. I was the silent martyr, until the moment the lights focused on my hand. Louisa, by contrast, was radiant in emerald green, the color emphasizing the vintage locket Lucas had given her. She moved through the room with flawless grace, introducing Lucas to donors, fielding compliments with humble demurral, and occasionally casting a glance toward me, a look of satisfied ownership. She truly believed she had tamed me. I carried my weapon, disguised inside a sleek, empty silver compact, a small, ultra-portable USB drive containing a compressed, meticulously edited clip of the damning evidence, the late-night calls, the search results for Louisa, and the audio of her whispering, "She's just a child, easy to break." I had cross-referenced the video footage with the private bank information. The evidence was irrefutable. The moment came during the main address. After Lucas delivered a short, glowing tribute to Louisa's philanthropic vision, he ceded the stage to her. As she walked to the podium, a figure of dazzling, deceptive light, I made my move. I walked calmly to the back of the room, near the AV booth, my white dress gliding through the shadows. I caught the eye of the technician, offering him a nervous, charming smile. "I'm Lucas Lin's daughter," I whispered, holding up the silver compact. "I have a brief, surprise tribute video for Louisa. It's very touching. Dad wanted it shown right after her speech." The technician, distracted by the glamour of the event and the authority of my presence, simply nodded, took the compact, and plugged the drive into the main system, preparing to patch the feed through to the enormous projection screen. I returned to the center of the room, standing where I knew Louisa could not miss my presence. Louisa began her speech. It was flawless, moving, humble, peppered with quotes about the importance of integrity and transparency. She was a master of using the virtue she lacked as her strongest shield. As she spoke the final sentence, "Integrity is not what we do when people are watching, but what we do when we think no one is," I knew it was time. I lifted my hand slightly, catching her eye. I smiled, a genuine, unsettling smile of pure anticipation. She looked at me, her smile faltering, a shadow of fear crossing her face. She saw the quiet certainty in my posture and recognized the danger. I took a deep breath, and before the technician could hit play, I spoke, my voice carrying clearly through the brief silence after her speech, perfectly pitched by years of public speaking as Professor Matcha. "Louisa is right. Integrity is what we do when we think no one is watching. But even the best masks crack under heat." I raised my voice slightly, addressing the entire room. "Shall we see what happens when we turn up the temperature?" The technician hit the button. The screen flashed to life. The first few seconds were exactly what I had prepared. The dark, grainy footage of Louisa on the phone, the visual evidence of the hidden burner phone, and the text overlay of her real name, Louisa, and the bank codes. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Success. But then, the video distorted. The audio suddenly dropped out, replaced by a cheap, saccharine piano melody. The footage of Louisa's hushed call was there, but the sound was gone. Worse, the video began to play backward, then fast-forwarded. Then it cycled a loop of Louisa looking confused and startled. The same few seconds of her realizing the camera had moved. The devastating text overlay was replaced by an enormous, tacky title card. "A Daughter's Melancholy Confession, Finding Peace." The final 20 seconds of the video which should have contained her cruel whisper, instead showed a sequence of flattering photos of Louisa and Lucas smiling, intercut with my own face looking sad and reflective, ending with a quote from my own retraction blog post. The most important case study is your own heart. I was aghast. The drive was patched, but the data had been compromised. She hadn't just predicted my move. She had hacked the very evidence I was using against her. She had uploaded a Trojan, or swapped a duplicate drive, or performed a remote digital sabotage on the file the moment it was plugged in. The master was always 3 steps ahead. The silence that followed was crippling. Everyone in the room turned from the screen to me. They didn't see a truth teller. They saw a petulant, volatile young woman, clearly struggling with emotional distress, attempting a childish, manipulative stunt to ruin her sweet stepmother's moment. Louisa, the actress of the century, rushed to me immediately. Her face was a perfect mask of horrified concern. "Valerie, honey, what is this?" she cried, taking my arm, her touch radiating protective fear. "A confession? We talked about your struggles, but not in front of all these people. Oh, my dear, you must be so upset about the things they wrote about your blog. Lucas, take her home." She had brilliantly framed my meticulously planned evidence drop as a spontaneous, mentally unstable confession. Lucas, his face crimson with shame and fury, roughly pulled me away from her. The collective pity of the room was now aimed entirely at Louisa, the saint who was forced to endure the madness of her stepdaughter. I looked back at Louisa as Lucas dragged me out of the ballroom. She stood tall by the podium, surrounded by well-meaning, horrified guests. She didn't smile. She didn't have to. Her eyes met mine, and in them was a look of cold, unwavering power. It was the absolute confirmation of my fear. She was smarter, colder, and far better equipped for this war than I was. This was my first official defeat, a public, devastating failure. I had exposed myself as the erratic aggressor. My credibility, both professional and personal, was completely destroyed. Lucas didn't speak a word to me all the way home. The only sound was the cold, sickening crunch of my shattered plans. The ride home from the Kensington Gala was the longest, coldest journey of my life. Lucas was silent, his jaw clenched, his profile etched with a profound sense of humiliation. He didn't look like a father. He looked like a victim who had just been deeply embarrassed by his assailant. When we reached the Highgate house, he finally broke the silence, his voice low, shaking with disappointment. "You have ruined everything, Valerie," he said, not shouting, but with a quiet devastation that cut deeper than any rage. "You have embarrassed me, you have humiliated Louisa, and you have destroyed the foundation's reputation. You're behaving like a lunatic, like a child." I tried to explain, to tell him about the altered video, about Liu Jia and the Zurich bank account, but he simply cut me off with a raised hand. "Stop, Valerie! Stop your theories! Louisa has been nothing but a saint. She has given me peace. And you're driving me mad with your paranoia and your cameras. I cannot live like this. She cannot live like this." He walked into the drawing room, Louisa's emerald scarf still draped around his arm. He returned moments later, holding a small, pristine overnight bag, my own luggage, packed with cold, surgical precision. "You need time away," he stated, his eyes avoiding mine. "We both do. Go stay with your friend Clara, or take a flat for a month. Just leave, until you can understand what you've done." He was kicking me out, not with anger, but with the weary, final sigh of a man choosing his comfort over his conscience. The pain was excruciating, not because I was homeless, but because I had just confirmed Louisa's ultimate control. She had used my defeat to make him sever the last emotional tie. I took the bag and walked out without a word. I went straight to Clara's small, messy flat in Camden. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply entered a state of emotional zero. The breakdown wasn't violent. It was quiet, internal, and total. I spent the next 3 days in a haze. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The world I had analyzed and deconstructed had just turned on me, branding me the fraud, the liar, the lunatic. Professor Matcha was dead. I pulled out my laptop and began my final confession. It wasn't a blog post. It was a private video journal, a raw, unedited monologue staring directly into the camera. My face was pale, my hair unwashed. "I was wrong," I whispered to the lens. "I thought I knew the rules of the game. I thought lies were clumsy. But Louisa's lies are beautiful. They are works of art. And the world wants to believe beautiful lies. I showed them the ugly, hard truth, and they threw it back at me. They chose the warm glow of the candle over the cold shock of the mirror. I confessed everything: the cameras, the digging, the discovery of Liudia, and the perfect trap she set at the gala. My voice was ragged, laced with a mix of hatred and admiration. I spoke of Lucas, of his choice, and the crushing weight of his silent betrayal. This wasn't for my followers. It was a desperate attempt to externalize the madness, to prove to myself that the truth existed somewhere, even if only in an encrypted file on my desktop. I felt like a religious zealot, preaching a gospel no one wanted to hear. On the fourth morning, Lucas came. I opened the door to find him standing there, not with the anger of the husband, but with the haunted weariness of a man carrying too much solitude. Clara, sensing the gravity of the moment, quietly excused herself. We sat in silence for a long time. Then, Lucas finally spoke, his voice dry and fragile, like ancient parchment. "She saved me, Valerie," he began, staring blankly at the wall. "After your mother died, I was nothing, a shell, a ghost, walking through an empty house. My business was failing, my health was failing, I was drowning in grief and incompetence. And then Louisa arrived. She was light, she was order, she gave me back my life, my confidence, my purpose." He took a shaky breath. "I know she has secrets." The statement hit me with the force of a physical blow. He knew. "I saw the documents before the wedding," he continued, his eyes finally meeting mine, filled not with malice, but with a deep, bottomless self-loathing. "A friend of mine, a lawyer, he sent me a file. It had some of the things you found, the history, the different name, the financial irregularities. And you married her anyway?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my throat. He closed his eyes. "I threw the file in the fire. I didn't want to know. I chose the comfort of her lie over the terror of my truth. I chose to live in the light she created, even if I knew the light was fake." He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. "Don't you understand, my daughter? Sometimes the lie is the only thing that keeps you alive. Maybe lies can save us, Valerie. They saved me from Amelia's death. They saved my sanity." He was offering me not an apology, but a justification for moral compromise. He was asking me to join him in the shadows of the well-lit house. He was admitting that the core message of my research, that people choose comforting deception over harsh reality, was true even for him. I stared at the man who was my father, the intellectual, the honest man, and I saw only another willing player in Louisa's cruel theater. He wasn't her victim, he was her collaborator. I felt a final, absolute shift within me. The pain subsided, replaced by a cold, frightening acceptance. "Then let me lie too," I replied, my voice calm, flat, and final. He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I said, rising to my feet, gathering the remnants of my shattered self. "If the only way to survive in the world you and Louisa have built is through beautiful, purposeful deception, then I will be the best deceiver of all. You chose comfort. I will choose victory." I had lost the battle for the truth, but I had won the battle for clarity. The line between victim and perpetrator, between truth and lie, had dissolved. I was no longer fighting Louisa for my father's heart. I was fighting her for the soul of the game. And Act 2. The father and daughter have exchanged their final, fatal contract. The world of absolute morality is officially broken. 2 weeks after Lucas's confession, I returned to the house in Highgate. I didn't return as the daughter, nor the analyst, but as the victor who had suddenly found her prize had vanished. Lucas had called me 2 days earlier, his voice strained and formal. "Louisa is gone, Valerie. She simply left. Took a few things. No explanation. I need you to come home." I drove back, my heart beating with a cold, terrifying triumph. I had won. My silence, my acceptance of the lie had somehow been more destructive to Louisa than my direct attack. I had anticipated a final, desperate move, not this quiet, total capitulation. The house was immaculate. Louisa's meticulous sense of order remained, a chilling echo of her presence. The kitchen was spotless, the drawing room furniture aligned perfectly, the vase of lilies, now dried, still sitting where the camera had once been tilted. Everything was in its place, except for the life that had animated it. Lucas met me at the door. He looked smaller, older. The light that Louisa had engineered in him extinguished completely. He was just a man, alone in a very large, quiet house. "She left this for you," he said, his voice flat, handing me a small, cream-colored envelope bearing my name in Louisa's elegant, flowing script. I opened it slowly. The note was brief, written with a delicate, almost sorrowful hand. Valerie, you wanted the truth. Now you'll live with it. I hope your victory tastes as sweet as you imagined. L. That was all. No explanation, no confession of fraud, no details about Lucia or the bank codes. Just a final cryptic challenge, a gauntlet thrown down from the safety of her escape. I turned to Lucas. Where did she go? Did she say anything about her bank accounts? Her family? Lucas shook his head, looking utterly defeated. Nothing. She just left. I checked the bank accounts. They are untouched. Everything is still joint. My business accounts are fine. There was no theft. She didn't take anything of value, only her clothes and that emerald locket I gave her. The total lack of financial exploitation was the final, devastating blow to my narrative. If she was a professional fraudster, why abandon the entire operation just as Lucas had conceded defeat and I had been neutralized? Why leave his substantial fortune untouched? My neatly constructed case of corporate espionage crumbled into dust. Where did you go, Dad? I asked, noticing the second strange detail, a small duffel bag near the stairs. Lucas hesitated, then looked at me with the same haunted eyes as before. I went to the solicitor's office. I transferred the house, the primary assets, everything into an irrevocable trust, with you as the sole beneficiary, effective immediately. And then I bought a ticket. I'm leaving. Leaving? Where are you going? It doesn't matter, he said, shrugging off the weight of his life. I'm going to find the truth, Valerie, the truth I chose to burn in the fireplace. I need to know why I threw my life away for a beautiful ghost. And I need to know if she was a villain or just a woman more broken than I was. He handed me the keys. The house is yours. The burden of the light is yours. He hugged me, a brief, desperate embrace, and walked out the door, leaving me standing alone in the sterile, silent victory I had fought for. The hunter had caught her prey, only to find the cage empty, and the guide to the cage had also departed. I was left alone with the echoes of their life. I retreated to Lucas's study, searching for any final clue. I found nothing except a small, generic USB drive tucked into the spine of Lucas's favorite book. It was labeled simply, Truth. I plugged it into my laptop, my fingers trembling for the first time since the gala. It contained a single, high-definition video file, clearly recorded recently. It was Louisa. She was sitting in the same drawing room where I had placed my camera, but the lighting was natural and unforgiving. She wasn't wearing makeup. The absence of the mask was shocking. She looked older, tired, and profoundly sad. She spoke directly to the lens, her voice devoid of its usual sugar-sweet timbre. It was simply a woman talking, raw and real. If you are watching this, Valerie, it means I failed. I failed to keep the light on. I failed to convince you, and I failed to convince myself. She confessed everything. She was Liu Jia. She had married the man whose business she had deliberately destroyed, but he had turned out to be more dangerous than her, leaving her with massive debts and a price on her head. She had arrived in London, desperate and running. I didn't plan to target Lucas, she whispered, her eyes filling with genuine tears, the kind that blurred the screen. I met him at a lecture. He was broken, just like me. I saw him, and I realized I could either destroy him for his money, or I could save him by giving him the illusion of hope. I chose the illusion. She admitted to the fraud, the fake life, the bank codes, all of it. But then she dropped the final, disorienting revelation. The documents you saw were real, Valerie, but I never used the money. I used the account to funnel my own earnings, the small consulting fees I make under Liu Jia's name, to pay off the debts of my past so they wouldn't come for Lucas. I saved him by giving him a lie, and the more you attacked me, the more I had to keep the illusion perfect for him. Your pursuit of the truth was going to kill the one thing I actually loved. She paused, then looked directly at the camera, addressing me with an exhaustion that transcended malice. You wanted to know why I said you were easy to break? Because you only see the world in black and white. You believe if someone is a liar, they must be a monster. But I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted you to stop looking so hard at the light, because the truth of my darkness would have destroyed your father. You won, Valerie. You forced the truth out. Now live with the knowledge that the greatest act of love your father received was based on my greatest deception. She slowly took off the emerald locket, placed it on the table, and the video ended. I sat there, paralyzed. I had constructed the perfect case against the perfect villain, only to find the villain was also a sacrificial protector. Was she telling the truth? Was the evil I fought so hard against merely a desperate, deeply flawed attempt at love? Louisa's final message had achieved what no manipulation could. It forced me to doubt not her actions, but the fundamental righteousness of my own pursuit. I had achieved the truth, but it was a truth that offered no clarity, only a vast, disorienting ambiguity. The question was no longer, was she guilty? But was I the villain for exposing the only thing that kept my father alive? I spent the next 3 days reviewing Louisa's final video confession. I analyzed her micro-expressions, the cadence of her voice, the telltale signs of deception I had spent years cataloging. Yet, all my training failed. The performance was too raw, too stripped of vanity to be a final manipulation. She sounded like a woman admitting defeat, not setting a trap. I was left with an unbearable intellectual dissonance. The empirical evidence proved she was a professional fraudster, Louisa Yi. The emotional evidence suggested she was a desperate woman who had found genuine love and chosen deception as an act of protection. My victory felt hollow, sterile, and morally tainted. I had saved the house, but destroyed the happiness within it. The silence of the house became a judgment. I needed to break it. I retrieved the video confession I had recorded at Clara's flat, the one where I looked like a deranged zealot, confessing my defeat and my plans for revenge. I edited it ruthlessly, splicing in the most damning audio fragments from my green room archive, and even cutting in snippets from Louisa's final, tearful confession, but without the context of her love justification. I created a mosaic of truth and distorted truth, a final academic paper on the subjectivity of reality. I uploaded the entire hour-long video to the Professor Matcha channel. I titled it, The Green Tea Queen, A Final Confession. The internet went ballistic. The video was a terrifying work of art. My haggard, honest face on camera gave credibility to the wild claims. I started by detailing Louisa's immaculate performance, her proxy aggression, and her financial alias. I presented the Louisa Yi evidence and the Zurich bank codes. I showed the moment she sabotaged my presentation at the gala. But then, the narrative began to spiral. I allowed my pain and confusion to bleed through. I didn't present the facts as a triumph. I presented them as a wound. She was so good, I narrated, my voice cracking slightly over the footage of Louisa's perfect smile. She convinced my father. She convinced the world. And in the end, she even convinced me that maybe, just maybe, her lie was more valid than my truth, because her lie made him happy, and my truth only made him leave. I then inserted the final, devastating clips from Louisa's confession, but framed them as her final brilliant manipulation, her final attempt to weaponize pity and guilt. She left me a letter telling me I wanted the truth, and now I have to live with it, I said, staring hard at the lens, my eyes burning. And she was right. I don't know who she was. Was she the heartless Black Widow who preyed on broken men? Or was she the heartbroken woman who genuinely loved the man she defrauded? I don't know. The more pieces I collect, the less the picture makes sense. The ambiguity was intentional, a final destructive flourish of my Professor Matcha persona. I refused to give the audience a clean villain or a clear hero, and I forced them into the same moral vacuum that I inhabited. The video went viral within hours, generating millions of views and an unprecedented level of debate. The public narrative splintered into a million pieces. One faction, my old loyal followers, saw the video as absolute proof of Louisa's depravity, a highly calculated financial predator who had escaped justice. They championed me as the brave, if slightly unhinged truth teller. The other, larger faction saw the video as the ultimate demonstration of my pathology. The comments were brutal and split down the middle at Truth Seeker 901. She is the real victim. The evidence is clear. Louisa is a professional. The fact that she can make Valerie doubt herself is the ultimate proof of her evil genius. At Moral Compass. This is not a confession, it's a breakdown. Valerie is projecting her own instability. She drove her father away with her obsession. She's too narcissistic to see that Louisa's tearful confession was an act of grace. At Reality Check. I don't care who is lying. I care about who looks happier. Lucas was happy with Louisa. Valerie is a professional unhappiness peddler. I choose the lie that heals. At Anonymous Observer. Maybe they both were. That comment. Maybe they both were. It echoed in my mind, a profound, unsettling truth. The green tea queen wasn't just Louisa. It was a metaphor for anyone who uses a beautiful mask to hide a terrible truth. Louisa used her mask for love, protection, and money. I used my mask, Professor Matcha, for righteous condemnation and control. We were two sides of the same coin, two women who chose strategic deception to survive. I had achieved my goal. The truth was out, but it was so messy, so full of competing motives and emotional complexity that no one, myself included, could find a definitive answer. The world was forced to confront the idea that the greatest villain might be capable of the greatest love, and the greatest truth teller might be motivated by the darkest kind of spite. The public debate raged, but for me, the fight was over. I had burned the bridge to certainty. I was alone, victorious, and completely lost in the ambiguity I had created. The storm eventually settled into a cold, persistent drizzle. My video confession had fractured my online persona beyond repair. Professor Matcha vanished, leaving behind a trail of confused followers and academic scandal. The house in Highgate remained mine, a magnificent, silent monument to a war fought and lost by everyone involved. Lucas remained gone, a willing exile searching for a clarity that likely didn't exist. Louisa was a ghost, her whereabouts unknown, her motives forever encrypted in the memory of the past. Years passed. I did not retreat into solitude. Instead, I channeled my unique, brutal education into a new field. I now teach at a prestigious university in Cambridge, not sociology, but a niche, cutting-edge course, the ethics of digital narrative and weaponized transparency. I am an expert in what I call the beautiful lie. My hair is sleek, my suits impeccably tailored. I have achieved the detached, formidable elegance that Louisa once possessed. I move with a quiet confidence, the confidence of someone who has mastered the art of deception, both her own and others. I am respected, feared, and never fully understood. I am lecturing on the final day of the semester. The room is dark, lit only by the projector displaying a single, stark image, a perfect, half-filled glass of matcha tea, the green powder swirling in the water, an unsettling blend of clarity and ambiguity. The greatest misconception in media ethics, I tell my students, my voice calm and authoritative, is the belief that the audience wants truth. They do not. They want a coherent story. They want a villain they can hate and a hero they can champion. The moment you introduce an ambiguity, a villain who loves, or a hero who lies, you fail your audience. You force them to choose their own moral comfort zone. I walk to the center of the lecture hall, picking up a remote control. The green tea queen phenomenon taught me that the person who wears the mask is often the most honest person in the room. Louisa's lie was magnificent because it served a purpose. It offered salvation. My truth was corrosive because it offered only despair. A student, a sharp young woman in the front row, raises her hand. Professor Lin, she asks, her voice earnest. After all you've analyzed, how do you spot a manipulator? How do we know who the villain is? I look at her, and I smile. It is a genuine smile, but it is one that contains 7 years of cold, hard understanding. I pause for effect, letting the weight of the question settle. You don't, I answer simply. You don't spot the manipulator. You look at the evidence, you examine the motives, and then you just decide who deserves to win. As you decide which deception is more useful to the world, and which story you choose to inhabit. I click the remote. The screen changes to an abstract image of a white light fracturing through a prism, casting shadows on a wall. That is the final lesson of the beautiful lie, I conclude, gathering my notes. In a house full of blinding light, shadows never truly disappear. They simply learn how to smile, a smile that is perfect, strategic, and utterly impossible to unmask. The lecture ends. The students pack up, discussing the lecture in hushed, excited tones. I remain at the podium, alone. I walk to the large window at the back of the lecture hall. It is a rainy afternoon, the kind of gray, persistent weather that London specializes in. I look out at the ancient college grounds, the stone buildings dark and imposing. The light from the ceiling reflects sharply off the wet glass, bouncing back into the room. I stand there, looking out, but the surface of the glass acts as a mirror, reflecting my own image, my elegant, poised reflection, my calm, controlled eyes. The camera begins to push in slowly, relentlessly, focusing on the reflection in the glass. It zooms closer and closer on my face until my eyes fill the frame. And then, for one devastating, impossible second, The reflection in the glass is not my face. It is Louisa's. The subtle tilt of the head, the knowing, enigmatic half-smile, the deep dark eyes that had once regarded me with cold ownership. The shadow has not only learned to smile, it has merged with the light. The reflection shifts back to me, Valerie Lin, but the smile remains. It is now my own, but it carries the distinct, chilling echo of the green tea queen. I have not defeated her, I have become her. The game is over, and the only winner is the mask itself. The camera holds on the smile, cold, perfect, and utterly ambiguous. Fade out.